So, okay, guys, so a couple of tips and tricks. So obviously Steve, he's about to open an office, so doing really well. Definitely taking his advice would be valuable. So tips and tricks that I want everyone to remember, especially when you're as a manager running an office. So sometimes you're doing the right thing with the customer, but you're not selling on the value. You're only selling on the price. So you got to remember, like, Spectrum is going to call and counter offer, and the other companies are going to, if they find out you're switching, customers going to get a call, say, hey, we'll offer it to you for $40 with a crappy speed. And then, like, we lost a couple sales today because of that, right? Because we're selling just on price, not on value, so that the customer gets a better price and then they cancel, even though it was a sale that was already made. So make sure you guys are paying attention to selling on the value and the actual speed, especially when customers, they don't like Frontier or they didn't like him in the past. Say, hey, that's why they hired us. They hired us to send us here to tell you that we've done so much better. We have so much better speed. We've been in business for 88 years. We've switched 4 million customers. Make sure you're using these things when the customers bring up stuff like that. And especially if you're preparing the customer to not call Spectrum, make sure you tell them why. Hey, I wouldn't call Spectrum until afterwards, just because it's gonna, we don't want you to have a gap with no internet and stuff like that. Also, another bullet point that I want you guys to remember is when they say no, they don't want the service, dude, make sure you keep going, because most of us, we say no to anything that's like unknown, but that's, chances are this is a good customer that's actually loyal to what, like, they just don't want to change. They don't want the hassle of like a new installation, a wire. So, but that's a good customer. So when they say no, make sure you're using whatever it is, a laminated thing, but make sure you bring up your value points. So where you're like, hey, I understand how you might not be interested. I also have to leave. They really just want us to show you, like, here, you get a free router. By signing up with me, we can waive the installation fee and we can see a couple of things we can do. But the speed is better. We just want you to get what you're paying for. So let me just run the speed test for you, and then I'll leave. I'll be out of your way, right? And making it sound like no hassle, and making it sound like it's going to be fast. If they don't have a spouse, and they ask you about the spouse there, it's like if the spouse is not there and they bring it up, it's going to cancel. Unless you can get the spouse on the phone. Get the spouse on the phone. So be really good at saying stuff like, hey, we'll just call him right now to make sure we're on the same page. Hey, I'm not allowed to do it unless the spouse is there. And if they don't want to give you a time where the spouse and you and them, they can connect or call, it's just, you just have to leave, because it's going to increase your cancels and your pendings for sure. So keep that in mind. Last thing for me is preempt the phone call. So when you leave the customer, you're giving them the pink sheet of the CSA form. You're telling, hey, you're also going to get a call from our quality team just to make sure that I'm up for a promotion. I'm up for a promotion, so they're going to call you just to kind of check that I did a good job and stuff like that. So if you don't mind answering, it might be from a 972 number or whatever phone number that your quality team is using. But tell the customer, hey, please, if you don't mind answering this call, it helps me with my job. I'm here melting in 100 degrees. That would be super helpful. And the customers always can relate to that, because we can all use like a thumbs up for our work, right? So that's it for me. Steve, what do I do if they don't have a social security, or they don't want to give it, or they just don't have one? What do you do?
Okay, so if they don't have a social, I usually ask, how long have they lived in the house? If they've lived there or they've been there for about 3 years or more, then what we can actually do is go to where it says refuse social. And when you refuse the social, you put in their address, the physical address that they're using. Then when you go through there, it'll run the credit check.
Okay, cool. And by the way, ask whoever's training you if that happens, but I think that's cool. What if there's a pause ID? What do I do?
Yeah, so I just want to add real quick, I would always push for the social. Just because you can sometimes use the address, it doesn't always work that way. So I would always push for the social. But just under the event that they just don't want to give you the social at all, then at that point, that's when I would.
And the way of asking for the social also, just don't make it awkward, right? Like, hey, please, can you put your social? Just be super normal, like, hey, here, you just got to enter your info to verify it's you. And it's not a robot. And then they put their social. So that's good, Steve. If there's a pause ID, what are some tips if I have a pause ID, which that means just the credit doesn't go through, right?
Yeah.
So
if you get a pause ID, the best rule of thumb is we actually have a number for pause ID. which will be given to you by your trainer. But you'll call them, you'll give them all the information to the order. They'll ask for the quote number. They'll ask for your partner ID, which is going to be on the form for whatever you're with. And then of course they're going to ask you for the information, and the customer is going to have to be there. Because what they're going to do is run it again on their end, but they're going to go into the Equifax system and make sure that everything matches up with what the customer has, so that they can resolve the pause ID.
Cool. All right. Thank you guys. Let's do some sales.